sleeves up. I decided to make this video because somebody commented on one of my other videos asking my permission to write a non-binary character who uses he/him pronouns and never really talks about the fact that he is non-binary, because it's just gender, right? People's lives don't revolve around gender. And then this got into a big long discussion with me and my wife about how do I answer this person's comment, what do I say to them? And so we had this big long discussion and we came to the conclusion that this is something that a lot of people seem to be confused about, and maybe some clarity would be useful.
Welcome to an unofficial episode of How to Write LGBT Characters and Why You Should Anyway. Why is it not titled that with my face at the beginning of this video? Well, because I didn't realise that's what this was when I was filming it, and this is editing Will coming in to say, yeah, it's an episode of How to Write LGBT Characters and Why You Should Anyway, featuring non-binary people, trans people, and do our lives really revolve around gender? Now take it away, overly kittened live action Will.
So, do trans and non-binary people's lives revolve around their genders? And this is a question that I get asked quite a lot, actually, a lot more than I kind of had considered that I got asked it. And a lot of the time it's in that really judgy way of don't make everything about your gender. It's just a gender, it's not a personality trait. And it's you're right, it's not a personality trait, but it does inform aspects of our personalities and of the way that we interact with the world. Because sex and gender are really intrinsic parts of life. Everywhere you go, you are being advertised to by your gender. In your clothes shops, in public bathrooms, in jobs. My wife used to work in construction and she was constantly challenged because she was working in construction. And now that she's moved out of construction, she's constantly being told by people, oh, let one of the guys pick that up because it's heavy. And she's like, why should I? I'm stronger than any of those guys. Then there's things like, that's a job for my husband. And the indoor versus outdoor job disparity. For example, he fixes the car and she does all the hoovering. He only has to do the job when it needs doing. She has to do the job all the time. There's a whole disparity there. There's essays about this. I'm not going to get into it. That's not the point of this video. The point is, gender is a really important factor in the whole world that we have created here. And then there's the fact that people do perceive your gender differently based on your sexuality. If you've never had to think about your life in direct competition with your gender expectations, it will seem like life does not revolve around gender, and how could gender be such an important role in somebody's life because you fit so seamlessly into what I like to call the Disney princess narrative. Now, the Disney princess narrative is basically you are aligned with the gender you were assigned at birth, you largely fit into the gendered expectations of the gender you were assigned at birth, and you are a heterosexual person who's going to end up married to a person of a different gender, usually what people would term the opposite gender. So you would be a woman who gets married to a man, or a man who gets married to a woman. You don't have to try and fit into the world. The world is designed for the Disney princess narrative, but the further you move away from the Disney princess narrative, the more it suddenly seems like your life is revolving around gender, because suddenly all of those gendered things that I talked about kind of stick out. And this is so much more prominent for people who are gender non-conforming, like people who are butch lesbians or just butch women in general, people who are camp men, even people in traditionally gendered roles that don't match their red gender, so like my wife working in construction, or like a man working in a nursery. Then you've got people who are trans who do not pass as cisgender. It's very open for them. Then you've got people who are openly trans, so they talk about their transness, they declare their transness sort of everywhere because why not? Then you've got the gender anarchist trans people who basically are the kinds of trans men who say, well, I want to wear a dress anyway because they're comfy. And trans women who decide, well, I like my beard, so I'm going to keep it. Those people, gender anarchy people. And then finally, the final category for this one is non-binary people who don't fit into the binary roles of gender and therefore really stick out. It really kind of attacks us from all angles. And now obviously, again, disclaimer here in the middle of the video, I am talking from my own experience. and the experience of the people I know. That does not mean that it is everybody's lived experience. And I definitely think there are plenty of non-binary people out there for whom their gender doesn't play a huge role in their day-to-day lives. And if you think about it, a lot of people are still really uncomfortable with the idea of a woman handy person coming into their house and fixing their drains or fixing their car or whatever. And people are still quite nervous around male nursery teachers, preschool teachers. And it gives you a glimpse into how gendered the world actually is. And again, I'm not going to go into like the gendering of positions and the long repeated tradition of devaluing work that women tend to flock to until it's flocked to by men, and then suddenly the value of it goes way, way up. Because again, I'm not the person to talk about this. There are essays out there for this, and I'm not making that essay. So with all of that in mind, do non-binary and trans people's lives revolve around their gender? Well, unfortunately, that all depends on their lives and the specific context of each interaction and how important their gender is to that particular trans or non-binary person. My life with my wife does not revolve around gender, and a big part of the reason for that is she uses the correct pronouns, she is gender positive, and we don't actually have to talk about it anymore because after I came out, which is while I was with my wife, like in a relationship with pre-being in a relationship with my wife, and then during our relationship sort of solidly settled into my gender. And all of that happened through a large process of time while I was with my wife. Now I'm comfortably non-binary, I'm happy with myself, I'm happy with my body well enough, I'm happy with my presentation and so on and so forth, so gender is not a huge part of my life with my wife. It's also not a huge part of my D&D sessions with my friends, because they all use the correct pronouns, and we have non-binary characters in the D&D session, and we have non-binary NPCs in the D&D session, because it's just normal, which is nice. We also have currently another player who is also non-binary, who also uses they them pronouns. And yeah, having this other non-binary person who's only recently come out as non-binary, and they use the D&D sessions with us because all of my friends that were already part of the D&D session are super chill about the non-binary thing, because I've been out as non-binary for the last 9 years. So they're all really chill about it. And like, it's just normal because, you know, it is just normal. So it's really nice for this other non-binary person to come in and just have it be normal, because they are having a little bit of trouble at work, as one does. My life at work, when I have like out of the house jobs and when it comes to like my writing stuff, yeah, there's a lot of gender in there because it's important to me to be referred to accurately, and because you constantly have to come out if you're non-binary. Like, you have to bear in mind that if you've got a non-binary character, even one who uses binary pronouns, likelihood is they will have to come out to pretty much everyone new that they interact with if they want to be treated with the respect that they deserve. Like, every time I go to a new place that I have to return to, every time I get a new job, every time I meet new friends, I have to once again come out as non-binary. I always have to be the one who says, "Hi, my name's Will, I use they them pronouns, I'm a non-binary person," and everybody else either deals with it or they very much do not deal with it. Hello, don't click it, don't click it, don't click it, thank you. The further away you go from your comfort zone, the more relevant and important and gender-based your life becomes as a non-binary person. And most of the time, the people who don't tend to repeatedly come out at work and repeatedly come out in new social situations and have their lives revolve around gender are typically the non-binary people who do not feel safe and comfortable doing those things. And that is really sad, and I don't know if you really want to write that into your book. Especially, this is going to be an upcoming video, but especially depending on who you're writing your book for. And I don't just mean like age categories, I mean like if you're making marginalised characters, you have to decide. It's going to be a whole video. Just keep viewing my channel if you want to watch that video. And then now I'm going to move on to the next point in my does my life revolve around my gender thing, and does my YouTube channel revolve around gender? Well, yeah, of course it does. I'm literally making a video about my gender now. So, do you write non-binary characters as having their lives revolve around gender? Unfortunately, the answer isn't easy, because the answer is sometimes. The thing to bear in mind is that your characters need to fit into the plot and the world that you have built, And so if discussions of gender don't really fit into that, then I guess you don't need to include it. But to use a personal example, in my book that is coming out soon, in my book that I intend to self-publish, there are a few non-binary characters. There are 2 specifically named non-binary characters, and the genders are never really discussed because they each use neopronouns, so it's really easy, just out and out, it's right there in the text. One of them uses she/them pronouns, one of them uses er pronouns, and that's it. It's right there in the text. It's impossible to miss. And the world that I have built for these characters to exist in is inclusive of non-binary genders. Wait a minute, there is a discussion about non-binary genders. It exists as part of a plot purpose and characterization purpose, which I can't get into too much because it's like potentially spoilers. In a different manuscript that I have that is nowhere near being ready to publish, there's no conversations about gender at all because there's no need for them in the world that I have built for the characters and then between the characters who interact in that world. But again, I am using neopronouns. I am using they, them, I am using she/them, I am using er. This is all to say, the advice part, it finally arrives. So if you are going to write a non-binary character, the advice part finally arrives. I highly recommend using neopronouns because it is one of the easiest and clearest ways of demonstrating to the audience, showing your audience that the character is non-binary without having to have them come out. And yes, again, I will say it, as I've said 1,000 times before, just have your character come out in the narrative. It makes everything so much easier if you just put it in there, put it in the text, so that there's no debate, there's no discussion. Your character is non-binary, say that they're non-binary in the text. And again, I'm also gonna put out this disclaimer that if you are a non-binary author trying to make non-binary characters, ultimately you have a lot more flexibility than if you are a cis or a binary trans author trying to write non-binary characters. I fully intend to make a video about this as well eventually, but you know, life happens and I forget things. But basically, if you are writing what is called an own voices narrative or character, you have a lot more flexibility because you can draw on your own experience in a way that if you are not writing from an own voices perspective, if you're not writing a character who matches up with your own lived experiences, you are gonna end up, you have to kind of constrain yourself to the pieces of advice that people from that marginalised community give to you. So anyway, if you liked this video, if you thought this advice was useful, please let me know with a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if any of the rambling things I've said about making videos have appealed to you. I will be making more LGBT characters and how to write LGBTQ characters and why you should anyway videos, as well as continuing the series of deciphering writing advice, as well as documenting my self-publishing journey right here on YouTube. If you want to stay up to date with me, one of the best places to do so is Instagram, because I'm actually active on Instagram. If you want to read my short stories, they're completely free over on nopoodles.wordpress.com. And if you want to support my work and this mess and this kitten that you can't see, but definitely does exist, then you can, there's a link to my Ko-fi account in the description below. Give me a coffee and keep your eyes peeled for my book when it comes out. Hopefully before the end of the year, provided all goes well. If not, sometime next year. Because I am self-publishing, so I get to set the deadlines. Woo! Showing that your character is non-binary, showing that your character is non-binary.